Hello. Um, this is the final set of videos for the final class. And for the final class, I just picked this concept of software process, which in the book is in the first chapter or in the second chapter. So why? Well, that's I would say that that is a button-up approach where where you have already done and learned about the different aspects that you need to address during the development of a software artifact. Now we are going to put what you have learned together, looking at the models and concepts that can describe and put these together. How do you develop software? And some of the things I already talked to you, right? So when you're talking about software process, so we need to answer this question: what is software development? So what is actually software development? And I told you that actual software development is the formalization process. So being a formalization process, it's a process where you start from something that is ambiguous, where you use natural language, to something that is more formal or that can be executed by the Turing machine. And so you have development process basically is picking this language and generating a solution in the other language. Even saying that is a solution is just a matter of where are you looking from, right? So basically it's just languages, okay? So the programming language can be even the problem of a compiler, but let's say that you as a developer are not in charge of implementing the compiler. So it's a tool that you are going to use. So it's from natural language to programming language. And so, as you know, that's lost in translation. So there are problems in language transformation. And basically, there are two approaches, and these two approaches allow me to categorize the different development processes you're going to find, software development processes you are going to find. And so how do you address this? There are people that say, well, if I want to move from this natural language to this programming language, basically what I need to do is I need to and so there's a big gap between natural language and programming language. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do small transformations. So to reduce this gap, in the sense that if I have a language that is not natural language anymore, but that is close to the natural language, so when I transform to the language, and then I transform to a next language. So by doing this, I try to narrow the gaps between the intermediate languages, and I believe that at the end I will get something that corresponds to the initial thing. And yes, that's one of the approaches, but this is can be tricky in the sense that when you keep doing these small transformations, although they are small, it's easy to introduce noise in the transformation. So other people basically say, well, instead of having a lot of small transformations, let's have no transformations at all, or just let's have no transform from natural language to programming language, or more or better, don't worry about natural language anymore. Just talk with the client and allow the client to be in part of the team, and it just can keep telling whether the product that is being implemented corresponds to what is really needed. And of course, there are several approaches to this. So you can also, to narrow this gap, to create higher level languages that are executable, and that's what model-driven development do. And then you just have a small gap between what is the head of the client and your your final language, that is a high-level language, but it is executable, actually is what is a lot of these tools that are visual programming and actually can be implemented from people that don't need to have a computer science degree and basically that they only need to know the business. Well, that's another approach. Okay, of course, people from Scrum, what they do is just they bring the client to the software development environment. So that's a bit the way things occur. So different approaches to do this, and actually, what we have been doing all this course is we have several activities that are involved in the development software development process. So that occur, that we do in the software development process, and these activities goes from requirements, solicitation, design, implementation, verification and validation, testing, reviews, debugging, maintenance. Well, and we'll see that different approaches to how to describe the software process or to describe the process of developing software basically play with these different activities in different ways. Actually, we talk a little bit about it. For instance, we talk already about whether we do top-down design, where you do the design and then you do the implementation, or if you do a more bottom-up approach where you do the implementation and then you refactor to get the design. But anyway, in some point you are doing implementation and design, so it's a good idea to distinguish this is design, this is implementation, because this doesn't mean that you can do both at the same time, or at least with short feedback cycles. In the sense, you can do a little bit of design, a little bit of implementation, which can occur. Okay, so it's valuable to distinguish between these different types of activities when you do software development. So you do requirements, solicitation. You can do. It depends on what amount of requirements you do, in the sense of amount in terms of how much time you spend doing the requirements or the detail of the requirements. But you do requirements even if you do a Scrum-based project. You do requirements. Okay, so we'll see that each one of these how each one of these activities actually integrates in a process model. Okay, in the process of the software. So when you do requirements, we already talked about these. You address the languages of the problem. You do design is the languages of the solutions, of the implementation, the execution languages. Verification and validation of software is basically the techniques and tools that basically check these languages, check whether these languages have quality or not. And then you have the software process that we actually is the object of this video or this class. So it's a systematic and disciplined approaches to language transformation, which some people says don't do too much language transformations. Others says I do a lot of small step language transformations. And then you have project management, okay, that is not directly with language, but does not directly deal with languages, but deals with the complexity of everything. You need to manage people, you need to manage the team, you need to manage the software, the amount of the large amount of lines of code and functionality. So that's the goal. You need to do this, and we learn about project management as well. So, what are the key ideas that I want you to learn about the software process? So basically, there are two things or two main concepts. Is the concept of stages or phases. It depends on the book you read, or depending on the source. Some people call it phases, others call them stages. But I think we are going to call them stages, and then activities. Okay, and I'm going to explain a little bit what is the difference between them, because the different process models I will describe to you afterwards are based on the way you organize stages and activities. And so stages is where you define milestones. So stages are big periods or large periods during the software development process where you define a milestone and you work towards the milestone, okay? And during the to work towards the milestone, you do several activities, and the type of activities you do to achieve the milestone will define the type of process development models you are going to describe. But it's not the goal now. But what is really important is to understand what is the milestone. A milestone is a point of macro management. So it's a point where basically you define this goal, you spend probably some period of time, it could be a couple of weeks or it could be a month or several months. And in this, when you finish this period, you're going to check whether you achieved what you wanted. Okay, and the goal of this is to decide whether the project should be cancelled, can continue, or need to be replanned. So it's a point where you assess the health of the project. Okay, and it's not bad, for instance, to cancel a project that you realize that is going to fail. So it's better to fail now than fail in 1 year from now. Okay, so you save a lot of money if you just, okay, this is not going to work, let's fail the project. So you have these stages, and inside these stages, what you're going to do, you're going to do activities. And activities is the activities that you perform, okay? And so activities are macro management entities in the sense that probably you can decide that, hey, I tried to implement this functionality and did not work. I just programmed this to be 1 day, but it didn't work, so let's try it in another way. So actually, they may not compromise the achievement of the milestone where the activity is included, but it's a way to manage everyday's work, okay, the tasks of everyday's work. And when you do activities, so it's software activities, you can do requirements, that can be activities of requirements, engineering, software design, implementation, validation, software evolution, okay? So, and it can be a mix of it. So I can have an activity that is just implement a feature which may include testing it, for instance. So it includes validation and implementation. So, and this is the two elements you're going to build your software development process. And then you produce products as a result of activity. So you produce code, or you produce requirements, documents. So these are the products that you produce. Okay. And what you have learned, actually, in this course till now is actually how do you do in each one of the activities. How do you do design? How do you do implementation? How do you do testing and validation? How do you do requirements? So that's what you learned so far. So what I'm going to do next, in the next video, is to put this together and define different types of process models. Okay? So that you can characterize the relation between stages and activities, and when you characterize them in some way, you give it a name. Okay, and that's the goal of the next video. Okay, see you.